Please give applause to our speaker.
Thank you, and nice of you to join me on this final session of the day. I'm going to talk a bit about learning and sharing. So my name is Bert Jan Schrijver. I work at Open Value, and this is my story of learning and sharing throughout my career. So talking about sharing, I am on Twitter, so if you have any questions or feedback, you can find me over here. But let's start with a question to you. So I think it's safe to assume that most of you work in IT, right? Who works in IT? Wow, everyone. Okay. So think back at the time when you first had the idea, like I might go do something in IT. What was it that made you think I'm going to work in IT? I'm going to make this my career. Yes. What was it for you?
I could get something to listen to me.
Yeah, oh yes, you could get something to listen to. Definitely. Yes. So who else would like to share? Okay, for me it started with this. So I apologize for making you go through this. Who thinks this music is pretty awesome? Who thinks it's total garbage? Okay, I think awesome wins. So this is the Commodore 64, and it was one of the first home computers that you could buy for your home. So you would hook it up to your TV, and then you could load games or programs from either floppy disks or from cassette tapes. And this was my first experience with a computer, so I mainly used it to play games, but then I got bored of playing games, and I thought, well, maybe there's a way to program this thing. So you could program it in BASIC, but this was about 30 years ago, and there was no internet and no that much resources that you could get. So I learned to program from a book, and it's basically when you had the book, and the book had source code listings of pages and pages and pages, and you would type them in the computer from the book. And then you run the program, and you found out that you had made an error, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was just typing, and I needed to debug the error, but I couldn't get that far. And if I got that far, it was only because this time my brother did not turn off the computer halfway me typing the source listing into the computer. So you could program in BASIC, and BASIC was pretty cool. You could make pretty good stuff with it. But then the next step was we got an actual PC, and it was a beast like this. This bad boy had 66 megahertz and 32 megabytes of RAM. And it could even run Windows. Barely. So I progressed a bit on, you could program BASIC on here too, but even a bit of Pascal. And with Pascal you could make actual executable, so .exe files, like real program that could run on your computer. But I was kind of like the only kid in my class at school that somewhat knew how to program. So how was I going to progress apart from learning to type from books and just figuring out stuff myself? Well, then the next device came into the house, and this changed my life. So I'd save you most of the noise. Who remembers having one of these? Oh, most of you. Okay, cool. So I feel welcome now that most of you have had a modem. So you probably have one at home right now, but a bit different one. So this is a modem that you would hook up to a telephone line. You now have a modem that hooks up to your cable or to your glass fiber or maybe to your phone line. And this is where you would hook this up to your telephone line, and then you could call other people, like basically other phone numbers, and you could use this to make peer-to-peer calls, for example, to play Doom Deathmatch with a friend on the other side of town. If not, my mother would pick up the phone during me calling somebody, and then I would hear her through the modem, but it would drop the connection. But there was something else. You could call to another computer with this. And these systems were called bulletin board systems, so a BBS in short. So with a BBS, somebody had his computer hooked up to a phone line, and there was special software running on there that you could connect to from your computer using a terminal, and then you would end up in something that looked like this. So there was a main menu, and you could upload and download files there. You could chat, but typically only with the person running the system, because there's only one phone line, so this got boring after a while. But there were a bit more luxury BBSs, and they had multiple phone lines, so that you could actually chat with multiple people. So you could kind of call this the predecessor of the internet. And I still have fond memories about this period, except for the first month when we had the modem, and we got a huge telephone bill, and I wasn't able to use the computer for like 3 months or something. But through these BBSs, I met a lot of different people who were into kind of making, well, let's call it artistic stuff with computers. And it turned out that this was the demo scene. And so what is a demo scene? Well, if you look it up at Wikipedia, you get this. But there's most Wikipedia articles, it's lots of text. But if you zoom into the good parts, you get this. So the demo scene is a computer art subculture that's focused on producing demos. And a demo could be a program that shows graphic effects, maybe music, maybe some 3D scenes. And the goal of this was simply to show off your elite programming skills to others. And since there was no internet yet, these were shared typically at events called demo parties. And a demo party is kind of like a conference, so people who are interested in the same type of tech, they join there and they can help each other out and share things. And this was, I think, the first time I was part of some community of people who were, like-minded as me. And it kind of looked like this. So this is Bizarre. That's the name of the party. It's called Bizarre. It was in '97 in Etten-Leur. And I'm sitting somewhere over here, if I recall correctly. So people would drag their computers to a hall and sit there for an entire weekend, sleeping under the tables in their sleeping bags. And the goal, there were basically 2 goals. You could meet the people that you only knew online. They were coming from all over the country. And there were competitions. So typically on the final day, there were competitions like who made the best music, who made the most awesome graphics, who made the most impressive demo. And there were prizes, but they were not really about making money. So a typical prize was a can of Bulgarian yogurt, for example. So it was mostly about, getting respect from your peers. But this was a fairly small one compared to this one happening in Finland. So this is assembly in Finland. 5,000 people gathered here in a ice hockey rink. And they brought, some let's say light snake, but that's not really a translation. And it was mostly about, also playing loud music and being the coolest guy or girl in the hall there. And I reckon that this is what people did before social media. So now you stay at home and use your computer to talk to others. But here they would pick up their computer and bring it to a place to talk to others, which was a lot of work, but fairly awesome. So to give you an idea, there were different types of competitions. So, for example, make a demo or music. But the ones I really liked were the ones where you had a set size limit on what you could do. So this is an example of a 4 kilobyte demo, or actually they were called intros. And the goal was to produce something as amazingly as possible in only 4,096 bytes. So 4,096 bytes for everything, graphics, music, fonts, whatever. So this is a 4 kilobyte intro from 1999 that 2 friends of mine created. I've shortened it a bit to keep only the good parts, but it looks like this. So I found that pretty amazing that you could do this in 4 kilobytes. So to compare how amazing this is, you just saw 4 kilobytes. If you take a picture with your smartphone, it's around 1 megabyte or bigger, right? So that's 250 times about as big. If you stream a song or download an MP3, it's about 3.5 megabytes, so around 850 times as big. If you go to start.spring.io, and you download the simplest application you can get, only Spring Web, it's a whopping 8,300 times as big as this 4 kilobyte intro. So what is more impressive? 4 kilobytes or 34 megs? Okay, well. And this was made by 16-year-old kids in 1999 without access to the internet. So then I went to study at the Twente University, and I learned a lot of things there, some more useful than others. For example, how you can open a beer bottle with a newspaper. How many of you know how to do this, by the way? Okay, so for those who don't know it, you take a newspaper, you roll it up as tightly as you can, so it becomes like a short cylinder. Then you fold it, and actually the place where it folds is really strong, so you can use this to open your beer can. It's a nice party trick. But don't tell anyone that I taught you. So if you take away anything from today, please let it not be that. So then I joined my first company and started doing actual work there. And the company was pretty cool, and I learned a lot of stuff there on how the company worked and how we're doing things there. But not so much from outside the company, so how were other companies doing stuff and solving problems similar as we were doing. Until this message appeared from a colleague. So he said, like, hey, would you like to go to this Groovy workshop? I had no idea what Groovy was, but it sounded groovy. So I said, okay, let's go. An interesting detail is that he asked me because the colleague that typically would join him on these types of sessions couldn't make it. So I was a second choice, he asked me. So I went to the workshop, it was pretty good, and there was a challenge in there that you needed to make, I don't know, a REST client in the shortest amount of time possible, and I won that, so that I got noticed there. And pretty short after the workshop, I got a mail like, hey, would you like to work at this company? And I go, okay, why not? So it's about time to move on. So up until today, the colleague that invited me to go to this workshop, he still feels sorry for being a part of me leaving that company, but that's okay. So when I joined that company, they were a bit more active in the Java community, and I think on my second day there, went to JFall 2012. It wasn't really a matter of if I would go, but I needed to go, the company said. So I was amazed to see all the awesome stuff going on there, and companies sharing, like, what are we doing? And I straight away got a feeling that I hadn't been missing out on this good stuff for years. So then I got a bit more active in local communities and went to a couple of meetups. And actually one of the first meetups I went to was about Docker. And this is 2013, so this is 6 years ago. So it's the early days of Docker. And I went there and looked pretty cool and played a bit with it. And the company I was working in at the time, it was fairly broad. So we had Java development, but also virtualization and Linux people in there. So I went to like the hippest Linux colleague of them all, and I said, like, I learned this thing about Docker. It's like virtual machines, but more efficient, and I couldn't really explain it, but it's something I think you should look into. So he's like, yeah, I'll look into this. And then a month later, I went to him and, did you look into Docker yet? No, I still need to do this. So a month later, I saw him again. It's like, did you look into Docker yet? No, but I'm going to do it next week. A month later, he visits me. Yeah, I'm just here to say bye. So what do you mean by? Yes, I'm leaving the company. So what are you going to do? I'm going to work at Red Hat as a Docker evangelist. So he still works there. So I still see this as my part that I did. Me, the developer, telling the Linux guy that Docker is awesome. So then one of my colleagues there pushed me to become a bit more active in the Java community. So I started writing for Java Magazine. And ended up joining the editorial board there. And this was kind of my first steps in becoming active in the community myself. So, by the way, for Java Magazine, we're always looking for articles. So if you have something interesting to share, you can write both in Dutch and in English. We'll help you write, and we'll review you and give you feedback. And if you're interested, you can just drop a mail at info@nljug.org. We're open to all kinds of articles, technical, non-technical. You get a reach of about 5,000 people that receive Java Magazine. So, end of the commercial break. So the company where I worked, they got acquired by a bigger, more hardware-focused company, so I felt it was time to leave. And then I switched job to another company that I had met through events in the Java community. So it's the second time I switched companies by a company that I met through events. And the company where I worked there, they stimulated me to, go on stage and start presenting some stuff. So this is a screenshot from the video of my first presentation at a conference ever. This is in JFall 2014. And as you can see, I'm not really experienced yet here because I'm currently explaining things to the screen. But it gets better. I'm explaining things to the floor. Having fun though, right? Because I'm laughing. And then my favorite one is, I'm explaining things to the corner of the room with my back to the audience. So fast forward a couple of years later, this is JFall a month ago, I'm explaining things to people now. So there's progress, right? So obviously this took a while. I first started presenting at meetups and then at local events and later at international events. I also helped a couple of communities to get started, a couple of local Java user groups, and it's always very rewarding for me because I got a lot of thankfulness in return. So then I joined the NLJUG board and I organized JFall and JSpring a couple of times, and there's also I learned a lot of things there. All kind of things that are not really relevant for my job, but nevertheless they were interesting to learn. So that was my story of learning and sharing. So let's talk about you now. But you don't need to do anything, so just sit back and relax. So why is it important to keep learning when you're working as a developer? Well, because we're living in a fast world. Just a couple of years ago, it was HTML and CSS and JavaScript. And then came jQuery and Bootstrap. And then there was AngularJS, and then there was Angular, and then Polymer, and maybe React, and maybe Vue, and maybe Redux, and TypeScript you also need to know. And this is just a small part, right? If I give this presentation in 30 minutes from now, there'll be 30 new JavaScript frameworks. And if I, in between, delete my node modules folder, then my laptop will be like 10 kilograms lighter to take home, right? But that's an old joke. So then in the backend side, there's Java, and it started with, I don't know, I think I started with Java 2, but the past years has been really accelerating. Java 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And then it's Java EE, or should actually say Jakarta EE now. Then you also need to learn about Spring, and maybe a bit of Scala, and maybe a bit of Groovy, and then Vertex is pretty cool, and then you also need to learn Kotlin, and you also need to learn about Micronaut and Quarkus, because these are all the rage now. So that's quite a lot. And then there's the infrastructure side. You obviously need to know about Linux, and maybe about the 3 big cloud providers we have, and about Docker and Kubernetes, and Helm, and Terraform, and maybe also about Cloud Foundry. So, and I didn't talk at all about databases, big data, machine learning. So I think if you consider yourself somewhat a full stack developer at the moment, then these are definitely the technologies that you could be able to explain. And they will be different next year. So how do you keep up with all this? How do you stay relevant as a developer? With pizza, obviously. My advice is to visit meetups, visit company events, visit community events, visit conferences. And well, if you go there, they typically you get in there and there's food, and then there are 1 or 2 talks, and there's drinks in the end. Worst thing that can happen is you have a boring evening with free food. Still free food, right? So you learn new things, you get to meet new people, new companies maybe. And you know what's nice with a career in IT? The better you get, the better it gets. So once you learn more and you gain broad knowledge, so basically you learn a little about a lot of things, then your job gets easier. Because of all the problems that people throw at you, chances are that you've seen most of them before in like a different context or a different environment. But once you reach a certain level of seniority, in terms of experience, not in terms of age, you reach a stage where if you don't understand something, you don't need to doubt yourself anymore. So I learned this a couple of years ago, and I was talking to, I think it was a customer, or it was a functional designer at one of our customers. And this person, he was getting a bit older, and he lost his wild hair, and he had compensated with an earring. No offense to earrings, by the way. And he said to me, with a bit low voice, Bert Jan, the last time I doubted myself when I didn't understand something is a long time ago. And at first I thought, what an arrogant person, like how can he say this? But once I gave it some more thought, I said, well, okay, if somebody tells me something and I don't understand it, is it my fault or is it the fault of the person who's explaining? So if you don't understand something, always ask for an explanation, because we're all smart people, right? We should be able to understand if the other is capable of explaining clearly. So let's talk about sharing. How many of you have ever shared your knowledge in some way? So presenting or writing or blogging? Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so about half of you. So how many of you enjoy doing this? How many think it's fun? That's about the same, I think. But the other half is thinking, oh, I don't know. You know why this is? It's because of this. So getting on stage for the first time can feel a bit uncomfortable, can be a bit exciting, nerve-wracking. But getting out there is where you learn. So outside of your comfort zone, that's where the magic happens. That's where you learn new things. That's where you push yourself to progress. So is it mandatory to share knowledge? Well, of course not, but I hope that you will. And I'll tell you why I like sharing knowledge. First of all, I think it's fun. For me, it's a way to meet new people and also to see something of the world. So I've spoken in quite a lot of countries, and it's typically a nice trip to see the city and meet some new people. And you're volunteering, typically. I typically don't get paid to speak. Not many people do. So you're volunteering to educate others with your experience. And if you're doing something voluntarily, then it better be fun, right? So where's the fun in it for me? Most conferences that spend multiple days have a dinner for speaker or some speaker activities, like usually the day before the conference. So this is a picture from Barcelona a couple of years ago, where we had a speaker dinner on a boat at sea, barbecuing, swimming, right after we went on segways through the city. So that's pretty cool. So you get to know some amazing people at these types of events. So I've met a lot of my personal heroes from the Java community at these types of events. So I've actually made a list of them. So who we have here? This is Mark from Oracle, who's the lead architect of Java. Trisha from JetBrains, Josh from Spring, Yara, who runs the biggest conference in Brazil, Stefan, who runs DevOps, Heather, who runs the Java community process. Well, you probably know, thank God. Holly, who runs the IBM garage. Raphael. How many of you use Mockito? Mockito is heavily based on ByteBuddy, and this buddy is the guy who wrote ByteBuddy. So you have something to think in. So there's one question to this story. In these pictures, there's the person who runs the @Java Twitter account. Who do you think it is? It's Yolande Poirier. She just switched jobs, but she used to run the Java Twitter account for years. And I learned a lot from her about social media and engagement, etc. Not the type of engagement when you're about to marry, but people engagement. Once you get comfortable on stage, then you get to be part of the fun yourself, and you get to control some of the fun you have. So I like to play some tricks on my audiences every now and then. So this is a picture from JavaZone, a conference in Oslo. And JavaZone has an amazing overflow room. So there are 7 rooms where you can visit talks live, but if you're too late for a room or the room's already full, you can go to the overflow room, and you can watch 7 talks in parallel. So you get a headset, you can switch through the sessions, and that is amazing. This is especially after a party, the night after, this is the best room to be in. Or if you are in doubt, like which session you need to follow, you can't choose, you just go here and you zap to all the good parts. So imagine being in this room and seeing this. So yeah, I got some response on this. That was pretty fun. But sharing knowledge is also important. So knowledge is the only thing that multiplies when you share it, as opposed to cake or beer. And it challenges you because you really need to get into depth of the subject you're teaching. So you learn to communicate, you learn how to get an idea across, and you help others, and in return you get new insights. So typically if I tell something at an event, afterwards people approach me to say, like, have you looked at this? Have you looked at this? You should try this. You should definitely try this. And also as a developer, you stand out in the crowd because not many people have the guts to go on stage. So you get noticed by companies earlier. And sharing increases your own knowledge, and it also enriches your own experience because you get viewpoints from different people. So these are people that join you in the room that have probably the same interests as you have, and they are usually fairly open to giving you feedback on where you can improve or problems you've had. So which ways do you have to tell your story, to get your ideas across? Well, you can do a keynote like I'm doing now, but I wouldn't advise to do this as your first session, because keynotes are one of the harder talks to get right, because if you present a session at a conference, in the parallel session, you're in a program and people can choose where to go. Did you choose to go to me? Well, probably because there were no other options, and the drinks don't start until 5 p.m., right? So you had no choice. And typically the audience are a bit bigger, so I wouldn't advise doing this, because people have not chosen the subject, but you need to find a way to entertain them. So a good start would be to present a technical session. Typically, these are 45 or 50 minutes where you present a topic that you're somewhat experienced in. Some events also offer deep dive sessions. They typically take around 3 hours, and then you get to go really, really deep into a topic, but you also need to be really deep into the topic yourself, otherwise the audience will catch up on you. A good way to start is to present a hands-on lab or a workshop. So the nice thing with a workshop is most of the work you do in advance. So you're thinking about the content, about the assignments, and then you don't need to do that much presenting, maybe a bit in the beginning, but in the end you're just mentoring people like you're doing on the office floor too. The easiest one for me is a panel discussion. So with a panel discussion, you just sit, and when you sit there, there's a discussion leader who asks questions, and you just say whatever pops up in your mind. And if you ever think about engaging in a panel or creating a panel, please think about diversity, because the world has seen enough panels with only white males. There's actually a word for this, it's called a manel. I would urge you to only participate in panels that have a reasonable amount of diversity in there. So, quickie. Some conferences offer the quickie format, which is 15 minutes. JFL does this, DevOps Belgium does this, and this gives you an opportunity to go on stage and share a quick idea in 50 minutes. So 15 minutes. And this can be a bit less intimidating than going for a full 50-minute session, 50. And then my favorite sessions are Ignite sessions. So Ignite sessions are 5 minutes. The good thing with 5 minutes, you can practice them 12 times in an hour. But the downside is you have 20 slides, and these 20 slides auto-forward every 15 seconds. So as a speaker, you either make it or break it. If you get lost, then there's no way to catch up. But for the audience, this is amazing, because if you nail all the transitions and your timing is perfect, the audience loves it. If you completely screw up, the audience loves it. So the audience is going to love it no matter what. So what defines a good presentation? Well, what do people consider good? So I frequently run a couple of speaker mentoring programs, so this is some of the content from this. And a good presentation entertains the audience. So if I walk away from a conference talk, I would like to have a feeling that I was at least entertained. Hopefully also learned something, but it should not have been a waste of my time. So the nice thing is with entertaining is that the audience doesn't really need to learn from it. So to give you an example, I've recently presented a talk on continuous delivery, and automation is obviously a big part in continuous delivery. And during this talk, I'm telling 2 stories about automation. And you won't be surprised that I'm going to tell them now too. So the first one is about a project that I did in the past. So I was working at actually the first company that I joined, where we were making software for insurers. And we were making web-based systems to apply for a quotation or a policy for insurance. So for example, for bicycle insurance. So if you insure a bicycle, then the place where you live is important, because bicycle insurance is more expensive in Amsterdam than when it is in Limburg, for example. So the first part of a quotation for an insurance is typically you enter your postal code and your house number, and then this gets used to calculate your premium. So we get a call in the morning, and it's the customer, and they're yelling at us because production is down. So what do you mean production is down? Nobody can enter new quotations anymore. That's strange, so why not? Every postal code we try gets no results. Okay, that's a clue. So we asked the hosting company, like, what's going on? And they said, yeah, the postal code table is empty. Okay, so that's the reason. So we can quickly fix this by rerunning the nightly postal code import that imports this from a file, and then everything is back to normal again. But we like to get to the bottom of this. So what caused this? So we talk again to the hosting company, like, did anybody log in to the application server? What happened? No, nobody's logged in for 2 weeks. Okay, that's interesting. So what could have happened? We check the application logs. No, nothing there. Okay, let's get the logs from the database. So we get the logs from the database. And then in this logs is a statement that says, truncate table postal code. That sounds like a pretty clear clue, right? So we start thinking, like, what could have caused this truncate? And we basically have no idea. So we're just sitting in the room and thinking and shouting things whenever we think of something. And then they always say, no, that's stupid. But then the smart guy in the room asks a question. And the question is, how long ago is it that we went to production? What's about a year ago? is it about a year ago? Well, actually, it's exactly a year ago. So what did we typically do during development? We had testing postal codes in the database. When we go live, we would drop the postal code table, do a fresh import, so we would only have production postal codes in there. And then we were like, okay, so it's exactly a year ago, and we typically clear this table before we go live. But why did it run now? And we're looking back through mails from a year ago, and then the last mail in the thread finishes with, yes, no problem, guys, I've scheduled it. And then the smart thing to do a year ago would have been to ask, what do you exactly mean by scheduling? So we go back to the hosting company and we ask them, like, is there anything scheduled on the database server? So they're looking into it and say, no, there's nothing special, just this one line that's been there forever. So what's happening in one line? Yes, it's just calling special.sh. So in special.sh was a truncate of the postcode table. So the person that had done this, he was in the train at that time, and he wanted to make sure that it ran if his connection dropped, so it made a cron job to run it. And the cron job was set to run at a specific date of a specific month, a specific time, at a specific hour, a minute, and he couldn't set the year. So exactly a year later, it ran again. That was a nice way to learn this. And then there's a second story. And this one I personally like even better, because it had nothing to do with IT. Well, a little, but not really. The second story is about a toilet. So I was at my parents-in-law's house a couple of years ago, and I was there with my kids. My daughter, who was 3 at the time, she came to me and said, Daddy, I need to use the toilet. So I'm, all right, go ahead. She goes to the toilet. Then my son comes up. He was 1 at the time, still in diapers. Daddy, I need to use the toilet too. Okay, sure, go off. And then I hear them like chatting from the other side of the house. And then I realized that there's a risk involved. Because the toilet at my parents-in-law's place is not a regular toilet. It's this fancy toilet that can somewhat automatically clean you. So this is the risk that I identify. So I thought I'd better go check this out. So I walk up there, and my daughter is sitting there, my son is standing next to her, and they're chatting, and I see that my son is, with his curious mind, inspecting the toilet. There are blinking lights on there. And then I make the biggest mistake of that day. I tell my son, Pim is his name, Pim, can you please not press that button? So if you're 1 year old and your father tells you to not do something, your life goal from then on is to press that button. So that was a mistake. So I see him like moving closer to the button, and I said, Pim, do not press that button. He's moving closer. I think I have only one chance to fix this, to try to step on my authority and try to see if I can convince him. So I said, Pim, do not press that button. If you press that button, you're in trouble. So he stands next to the button. He looks me straight into the eye. I see a sparkle in his eye, and without breaking eye contact, he pushes the button. So then I have a split second to decide. The toilet is fairly small, so I'm standing like in the entrance, and my son is there, my daughter is sitting here. So what can I do? The only thing I can do is rescue her from this situation, because if that toilet activates, she will be done with potty training for like 3 years or so. So what can I do? I lift her up. I try to grab her, lift her up to save her from this device, and at that moment it activates. So the good thing was that it was nice and warm, but that was about all good things that happened there. So it's spraying and everybody's wet and they're shouting and crying, and it was all a big fiasco. So moral of the story is automation is only as good as its ability to cope with the unexpected. So whenever you're automating scripts or toilets or whatever, think about which behavior your users or the system is going to apply there. So if I were to design a toilet like this, I would only have it activate if there was a behind above it, if you catch my drift, and don't do anything if it wouldn't detect that there was somebody above this. So, but all was fine, and my daughter learned to use the toilet, and Eve, my son, did. So, all right. Was this? Where was I? Was this entertaining? Okay, good. So then it was a good example, right? But ideally, you also want to learn something, so you educate your audience. You want to bring some of your own experience and transfer it to your audience. And I think a good way to do this is to introduce and inspire. So you cannot cover 34 megabytes of Spring Boot in 50 minutes, but you can cover maybe the basic concept. So the goal that I typically try to reach is to give an introduction, give a head start. I'll save you these problems that I run into, and also inspire people to continue working with this technology or this practice at home or when they're back in the office the next day. So a good presentation always also makes contact with the audience. So it's easier to keep your attention to the speaker when you feel somewhat involvement, when you wave your hands on my request a couple of times. And also it's nice if a presentation shares a passion, so something you're passionate about. Because if you're passionate about something, it's easier to bring this passion to the audience and to be enthusiastic about it. It's not mandatory. You can talk about stuff that you're absolutely not passionate about, but it helps if you actually enjoy what you're sharing. So a good presentation tells a couple of things. It tells your story, the results, what you've done, and what you've learned. So make it like sharing experience, and that's typically what works well with an audience. So who's ready to take the stage? Well, nobody yet, because I'm not done and I have 10 minutes. But I see some of you thinking like, well, I know at least 4 reasons why I shouldn't present yet. And I know exactly what you're thinking. So the first one is I have no idea what I should talk about. You did interesting stuff in the past year, believe me. So typically what I do is look back at what did I do in the past year, any projects at a client or maybe a hobby project I worked on. And there's interesting stuff in there. And also, don't think that what you're going to tell is not interesting to people, because it's not for you to judge. It's to judge for the program committee that will accept your talk or not. It's to judge for the audience. Entry-level presentations also do fairly well on conference, because there's always people who've never heard about this technology. I have no idea where to start. Well, I'll tell you in about a minute from now. I've never presented before. And if you keep saying this will be some sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. A wise person once said, I've never done it, so I think I can do it. This is a famous quote from Pipi Langkous. Yes, good you got that. I'm afraid I'll make a fool of myself. That's something you can work on by practicing, but also mainly by doing it a lot. Once you get on stage a bit more, then you get comfortable. I do practice my presentations, but typically about timing. I might not way over time or way under time, and choose of words, because English is not my native language, and it helps if I've found my words a couple of times. So a nice story about making a fool of yourself. It's not about me, luckily, but it is about a friend of mine. So I was talking to Matt Rabel, who's also fairly active in the Java conference circuit, and he told that he was with his friend at a conference. So it's always a friend of a friend, right? He was with his friend at a conference, and the friend was scheduled to speak after lunch. So they went out for lunch, and they had some pretty good seafood. And then his friend didn't feel too well, but he needed to go on stage. And they couldn't find a replacement in 20 minutes. So he was, okay, I'll go through on adrenaline. So he was getting ready to talk. He was on stage. He had 3 minutes left, and he was already mic'd up. And then he felt like this nauseous feeling coming up, and he said, oh no, I'm going to be sick. But luckily, the toilet was right next to the room. So he ran off to the toilet, got sick there, got back in the room, and the people are sitting there like staring like, and then he's like, so what's going on? And then somebody in the front row says, the microphone was already on. But still, he felt better and did a pretty good job at this presentation. So besides staying away from from seafood, any other excuses? I think you're all fairly capable of telling a good story. So where do you start? Well, start by finding a topic and choose something you're comfortable with. Next step is to write an abstract. So get a title for what you're going to share and a couple of sentences. And this is basically all you need to do before you know that you're going to tell this somewhere. Because if you start preparing the entire presentation and nobody wants to hear it, then you're wasting your time, right? So only write like a couple of lines. This is what I want to talk about. And then have it reviewed by colleagues or by friends. What do you think of this? Submit it. So send it to a meetup, an in-company event, a conference, and then it will get reviewed by the organizers. So for example, for JFL, we work with a call for papers. There's a program committee of 8 people from the Java community. They will all rate all the submissions individually. And then in the end, we get together, we see the average ratings for all the sessions, and we build a program from there. So here again, it is not your job to think whether what you want to share is interesting. The program committee will do this the first time. If they think it's interesting, you'll get accepted. And then the audience that joins your room will tell you whether they think it's interesting or not. So a fun thing is that typically something that you think is basic and not really interesting can be really interesting to a lot of people. And also, a small piece of advice, don't be afraid to cross the border, to submit stuff to conferences abroad. Maybe in Germany, you can still go there by car. Maybe in, I don't know, Scandinavia or Belgium. France is mainly French-oriented, but once you cross the border, you go to a conference, you're an international speaker to them. So this can work, especially conferences in Eastern Europe are really fond of having speakers from Western Europe. So, to summarize, how do you engage in learning and sharing? Join meetups, join events, meet new people there and learn new things. Participate in communities. So I gained a lot from becoming active in the NLJUG and met a lot of amazing people. Share what you've learned. Let other people profit from your wide experience. Don't help yourself, but ask for an explanation. Think about earring guy. And the better you get, the better it gets. Hopefully, I'll meet many of you while learning and sharing in the future. So now please go ahead and kick some ass.
Any questions for our speaker? Maybe I can start. So, one of the things that I was thinking is, do you need to be a real expert to present something? Because I'm always afraid I know something, but if I want to tell it to people, maybe they know something more than me. Or maybe they will ask me a question, which is I don't know. Yep. And then,
Yeah, that's a good question.
Right.
You don't need to be an expert. You need to know enough to learn other people what you've learned. So as long as there's like at least 15 minutes of content knowledge gap between what you know and what they know, then it's fine. If they ask a question, you don't know the answer, then say, okay, I don't know the answer, but I'll look into this and I'll get back to you. This thought is, there's a word for this, it's called imposter syndrome. So the idea with imposter syndrome is that you're continuously afraid that you're going to be discovered as an imposter. You don't know anything about the topic. There will be people in the audience who will be screaming at you that they know more. Well, this is a good thing because it means you care about doing a good job. And typically, sometimes there will be people in the audience who in the round of questions will want to ask a question, and then there's a 5-minute story where they show how much they know about the topic, and there's actually no question at all. So in that case, I just say, okay, thanks for your feedback. But this doesn't happen that much. So, and it's also not really your problem to think if something is interesting, because the organizer of the events will decide, and the audience will decide.
Okay.
So there's more and more conferences, there's more and more content available. I think about CI. I mean, you've been presenting about CI quite a few times the last months. There's a lot of stuff about CI out there. How do you find a twist or something that's, a bit more than just talking about Quarkers, for example?
Yeah.
How would you spin it?
Yeah. So what I typically do is try to dig in my own experience, because the nice thing is that I'm the only one in the world with my experience, as goes for everyone. So typically I try to go a bit further than just sharing like your first introduction in this topic, but share a bit like, this is how we use this at this customer, this is what worked, this is what didn't work, this is how we use it here. And this way you can kind of stand out compared to somebody who has just read a Hello World tutorial and goes on stage with this. So as long as you're sharing your own learnings and failures and experiences, I think you can bring somebody that nobody else can, because it's your experience.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah. So let's say I want to dig into your archives, right? I want to learn something new. I want to find the topics that did not make it last year. Do you have an archive history somewhere, and I can
You
kind of
mean
browse
from events or something?
Yes, yes, yeah.
We do, but we don't share them publicly because maybe, well, this is somewhat private information. So the fact that people are submitting topics they'd like to talk about, it's something that's only for the eyes of the Rome Committee. Once we select it, then all privacy is lost. You're basically public domain. But until then, we keep them to the event. What we do is select some of the papers that had almost made it, and then ask them, for example, can you write an article about this topic and present it and write it for Java Magazine, for example. But if you have like specific questions, you're always free to ask me directly or reach out on Twitter, and I'll be happy to help to give you some ideas.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much for your inspiration.
Thank you.
And I hope that me or anyone will present something in the
I hope.
next Beckett Summit. Thank you very much.
Enjoy drinks.